Okay, so you clicked on the video and now I'm guessing many of you guys are probably wondering what's going on. What did I just get myself into? Well, let me explain. For those of you who are new to the channel and just clicked on it because you saw Deku in Squid Games, welcome. My name is Zether and I'm going to have a great time having you guys on the channel. That being said, if you are a returning subscriber who has no idea what Squid Games are, let me explain. So, what the Squid Games are is basically a series of games that if you win and there can only be one winner, then you basically end up getting a lot of money, but the money comes in the form of people's deaths. Because the way that it works is that a bunch of people who are in debt or people who generally have nothing to really live for pretty much end up going to this place of private facility, which is called the Squid Games, where everybody pretty much plays these childhood games from what's called Korea, I believe it was, or just, you know, like games along those lines, right? Some childhood games such as like freeze, red light, green light, you know, stuff like that, right? You play those little childhood games, and if you fail or get eliminated, you die. And basically it just keeps on going until there's one person left who ultimately ends up getting the sum of the money that's there. So we're going to be throwing Deku into that scenario, and this is what I believe would happen had Deku been in the Squid Games. Oh, also, before I do get started, what's it called? I'm pretty sure many of you guys are wondering, is the rest of the My Hero Academia cast going to be inside of the Squid Games? Well, yes, they are. Class 1B and Class 1A is both going to be in the Squid Games. And you guys are about to see what would happen in the My Hero Academia story had this taken place. That being said, let's get started. Alright, so before I do get into the actual what if, I'm going to basically have to set up the table. Or basically set up why every single character ends up in the circumstances of being in the Squid Games. And we're going to be starting off with the main character. Now, many of you guys are probably wondering, alright, Zether, what's going on here? And to answer a couple of questions, in this version of events, they are going to be handling the Squid Games when they are all around their high school ages, meaning the ages that they were all around when they were in canon. So they're all going to be varying between the ages of 14, 15, and 16. That being said, we're going to start off with how Deku's life goes. In this version, Deku's life is going to be a lot different than in the canon, because in this version, Hisashi is going to be going out for milk, which leaves Inko to basically have to be a single mother who has to take up a bunch of shifts to barely even make ends meet and survive with Deku. That being said, Deku has it pretty rough growing up, and when it comes down to it, Inko ended up passing away just a couple years ago. That being said, Deku ended up having to pick up a part-time shift, and living in his apartment has left him in crumbling debt. Deku owes about $100,000 worth of debt. Not only that, but Deku borrowed some money from some loan sharks, and this just leads Deku to have to pay them back about $30,000, or I don't know what the conversion would be if we were talking about yen. But yeah, Deku has to pay back quite a lot of money to some loan sharks. Not only that, but Deku has to pay back a lot of money to his little his property manager, or what would that be called? His home, I don't know, just property manager, all right? He has to pay his rent. It's a lot of money, all right? That's the bottom line. And this honestly just leads Deku to having a pretty rough life off the jump. Deku does not have anything really easily handed to him or anything. Deku doesn't really have anybody or anyone. And the only people that he's ever really known and comes across with a lot of times is people by the name of Bakugo. Now, I'm guessing a lot of you guys are probably going to be wondering how a couple of the other cast members are going to end up in that situation. Well, a couple of the more irrelevant characters are going to end up on that because simply they were tricked into it. They were told that it's just a game show. You know, you play some games and you win some money. So a lot of the people from Class 1B and Class 1A included, people such as Mineta, Kaminari, let's see, Koda, people who look more along the signs of like they need money. So like Uraraka, she would join because she heard about the money prize, and so she ended up joining herself. People such as Ida and Momo, people who don't really need money. So I'm going to be having to change their situations a little bit. Ida is still going to be from a line of wealthy people, and that being said, well, him being part of the wealthy, bunch of people, his family, the Ida family, he basically ends up going into bankruptcy when this father ends up making a bad financial decision, and this basically sends his money into horrendous debt. That being said, Ida, when offered the chance to make a bunch of money for simply playing a bunch of games, decides that he's gonna do it. He's going to participate in the Squid Games. And so a bunch of other people simply just have rough situations. People such as Jiro, and more along the lines of people who simply just wouldn't normally do something such as the Squid Games, would end up having very different home lives. They would end up going into debt. And to put it simply, a lot of them would be under situations similar to the ones of the characters in the series of Squid Games. A lot of the people who would have normally ended up having a lot of money would end up basically being in debt, being in bankruptcy. Some of them would just go for the game. Some of them would go for the money, but ultimately they would all arrive on the location of the Squid Games private resort. This is when they would all basically wake up, as they would all be in beds. A lot of them would wake up and open their eyes. Deku would see that he has a strange jumpsuit on, the same one in the thumbnail, actually. As Deku begins to look around, he's like, where am I? And everybody else would basically begin to wake up around himself. This is when Deku would notice a boy with blue hair and some glasses right next to him. And as he would ask him, hey, you know where this is? He would say, yeah, we're at the Squid Games, right? This is where we play the games for the money. Deku would say, oh yeah, sounds like fun. I can't wait to get started. Who do you think is going to win? Ida would look at Deku and push his glasses up as he would say, hopefully me. He would crack a smile and say, hello, my name is Tenya Ida. Deku would look at Ida as he would say, hey, my name's Izuku Midoriya. And this is when a brown-haired girl would come up from behind them, as her name would be Uraraka. As she would say, hey guys, you guys in the Squid Games too. It sounds like a lot of fun. She would say, I hope I make all the money. As this is when she would say, my parents really need it for their debt. As Deku would say, so do I. He would be thinking in his head. As this is when all of them would basically get acquainted with each other. And Bakugo would actually end up catching Deku from the corner of his eye. Bakugo ended up getting captured. Bakugo basically ended up getting placed in the Squid Games because of a different scenario than many of the other people. See, many of them wanted money, some of them wanted fun, but Bakugo just wants to prove that he can win no matter what it is. His god complex is basically the reason that Bakugo ends up participating inside of the Squid Games. That being said, Deku, seeing Bakugo, would get pretty terrified of this because Bakugo's bullying didn't let up just because Deku owed a lot of money or he was struggling financially. No, it in fact got worse. So, with that being said, as soon as Deku notices that, he kind of puts his head down and tries not to make eye contact with Bakugo. That being said, Bakugo would then basically get up out of his bed as he would begin to walk over to Deku and say, hey, Deku! This is when Deku would look up as he would see Bakugo and he would say, looks like he got stuck with me again. I'm gonna make sure this place is a living hellhole for someone like you. As Deku would say, yeah, right, Bakugo. This is when Ida would step up in front of Deku and say, how dare you speak to him like that? We're all here to play this game, so just do your own thing and leave us alone. This is when Uraraka would stand behind Ida and say, yeah, leave us alone. This is when Bakugo would say, you damn, as before he can do anything, one of the workers would step in there. As I bet you guys are all wondering, do they all have quirks? Yeah, they do have quirks. And a lot of the characters from My Hero Academia story are going to be in this story as well. That being said, I bet a lot of people are probably wondering, what's Momo doing? Well, she's in the story as well. Similar to something that happened with Ida, Momo's company would basically have ended up going down, would have basically ended up being found as corrupt. That being said, it led them in bankruptcy. Not only that, but led them in negatives. They owed back to a bunch of people almost as much as they made. So when Momo says she needs the money to save her family and put them back afloat, she seriously does need the money. That being said, everybody would basically look up at the little guy who's talking as Bakugo would stay quiet and say, so, how's these little games gonna work? When are we gonna finally get started? And this is when the man would look at Bakugo as he would basically proceed to just say, we're beginning now. This when a bunch of other soldiers would come in there with guns, as everybody would understand that they're serious. Everybody would basically get in a neat one file line, as all of them would basically have to sign these little consent forms and read the rules. All of them would do so, and everybody who wants to play the game or participate would of course end up signing the papers, as many of you guys would expect. This one, all of them would basically end up participating in the Squid Games because, I mean, they all came there of their free accord without knowing what was about to happen. And so, this is when they would all pretty much proceed to, well, go into their situations, which they did. That being said, everybody would basically end up getting into a file line, as they would all end up going to the first game. This is going to be red light, green light. Yup, the same game that ended up taking out a huge majority of people in the normal story. Not only is there going to be My Hero Academia characters in the story, but people from Shiketsu High, such as Inasa, Kami, the little guy with the meatballs and stuff like that, he's actually also going to be in the games. Not only that, but it's not like it's only limited to like normal people. So there's a couple of adults in there, and it's just a bunch of random people who they don't really know that well. That being said, though, this is when all of them would pretty much proceed to go out into the field, when they would all pretty much get the rules explained to them. Deku would notice the giant doll in front of them, as he would look at Ida and say, "Look at that. It's so creepy. It's so weird." Ida would look at Deku as he would say, "Yeah, a little strange, but just get ready for the green light, red light game." This is when all of them would pretty much proceed to, well, get in line, as all of them would get in like in rows and stuff like that. And this is when they would say, "The game will now begin." Everybody would hear as they would like blow a whistle, and this one you would hear something, the little doll say, "Green light," as a bunch of people would basically begin to run, and two people would have a little contest of speed to see who's going to get there first. This is when the doll would turn around and say, "Red light," as immediately everybody who was like running and didn't stop in time or had any motion would die. A bunch of the people who were more on the irrelevant side and a bunch of people from Class 1B as well as 1A would end up dying. People such as Mineta, yeah, he loses his life. And when other people who are more on the scared tendency would end up dying as well. Mineta, Koda, Toru, yeah, she ends up dying too because of the clothes that she has on her. The scanner is able to detect that. And people such as Shoji actually ended up dying in this. From Class 1B, a bunch of the more irrelevant characters who nobody really has too much attachment to, such as people who aren't Kendo, Tetsu, Monoma, and, you know, the little plant girl. Who else? Setsuna, she ends up living as well, but a lot of them end up dying, and a bunch of people from Class 1A also end up losing their lives on this day. Half of the people who participated, meaning that there was about like 200 people, it's now cut down to 100. And you guys are probably wondering, why was it so low to begin with? Well, thing is, it's going to be a lot different. This is, well, more of the first couple of Squid Games ever. So it's smaller, and there's going to be less people who end up actually losing their lives this time. That being said, this is when they would finally get into the little Squid Game stuff, as all of them would finally realize what's going to happen. And this is when all of them would basically begin to rush on in there, as each and every single one of them would try to pretty much survive. They would all try to make it with their lives intact. However, this is when Deku would realize what's at stake here. And when the doll would turn around and say green light, Deku would immediately just stay shaking. Deku could not move. And this is when some kid comes up to Deku and goes, "You gotta go, man." But this is when the doll would say red light, as the kid who literally just tried to help Deku out would get shot right in the brain and fall down. The blood would splatter on Deku's face as he would say, he would begin to breathe hard and just begin to shout as he would say, "No!" This is when a bunch of other people would begin to get startled and move, as they would get shot as well, and the numbers would just begin to dwindle more and more and more. That being said, the doll would say green light, as Deku would realize that he has to move, and immediately it would say red light, as it would turn back around and a bunch of people would get shot, more along the people who, you know, you would think that would survive. And I'm pretty sure you're probably wondering why many of these people don't just use their quirks. Well, I mean, they try to, but it's like they get shot by these bullets, which are extremely hard. Most people under normal circumstances would end up dying. Plus, if the machine ends up capturing you moving, you die either way. So people such as Kirishima, who pretty much hardened, and Tetsu, who also did the same thing, thinking that they could just simply get away from it like that, by the end of the Squid Game event, they are gonna die. It doesn't matter what they do, what weird advantages they have. Yes, they can use their quirks, but if you cheat in that way, you're going to die. It doesn't matter what the situation was, you're losing your life. That being said, this one, all of them would finally understand what exactly is going on. As people and more people would finally begin to die, the numbers would dwindle, and Deku would have fear. So much fear, in fact, that he could not move. Deku would just be thinking a million thoughts inside of his mind. It's basically our normal Deku, but just hardened a little more by the life that he lived in this version. So you could imagine what Deku's thinking. Deku at this point would be standing right behind somebody. As Deku would continue to walk, however, he would trip on one of the dead bodies and Deku would fall onto the ground, as this is when Deku would have the scanners scan right at him. And this is when Deku would get grabbed on by one person, this being Todoroki. Todoroki would grab onto Deku's back, and I'm guessing many of you guys are probably thinking that this is going to go exactly like the Squid Games that we had in the normal Netflix series. You're probably sitting there like, yup, about time to click off the video, but no, it's not like that at all. This isn't going to be some plot armor filled story where Deku's exactly going to have all the advantages of the world, but the second that Deku dies, the story ends. So, I hope you guys enjoyed the first part of What If Deku Was in the Squid Games. I hope you guys come on to return the very next day. If this video does well enough, then I am going to be dropping this series as a full entire series tomorrow. That being said though, guys, I do hope you guys went on to enjoy the video. If you did, make sure to share it with a friend. Make sure to send it to some My Hero Academia fans that you guys may know, and maybe just send it to, people who you may know that watch Squid Game that might think that this scenario was interesting. That being said, it has been your boy Zether. I appreciate the view, and with that being said, I hope you guys have an amazing day, but I am out. Peace.